Hi Plant Science class. Today we're going to be working on the hydroponic system, and here we have our 128 count cell flats. We had so many issues with lettuce. Typically in the hydroponics we plant predominantly lettuce, and the only one we're going to be planting is this little guy here, Tom Thumb. And then we're also going to be planting chard and flat leaf Italian parsley. And the reason we use a 128 count cell is because it's a little bit bigger than the 200, I think 12 cells, where with the 200-ish ones you need to get them out within 3 weeks. With these you can let them sit for maybe 5 if you really want to push it, so it gives us some wiggle room. So I'm going to be planting these in the field and the hydroponic. Here is the hydroponic field trial. In row 30, 31, and 32, respectively, we have our parsley, lettuce, and Swiss chard. And don't worry, they're not out here without protection. I think the parsley is probably the easiest to see. This little white media, that sluggo, that will help keep insects from eating it. And then you'll notice these conduit wires. They're inexpensive and reusable. I'll be draping Agribon floating row cover over them, which you can see over here kind of what that looks like. And that'll help keep vertebrate pests from getting in it. For some reason, vertebrates have not figured out that they can just kind of shimmy under it, and it's really effective. Hi guys, so I'm gonna be putting together the hydroponic system, and all you need for that is a rubber mallet and plumber's putty. This stuff is really inexpensive. It's also nice because it's not permanent, so at the end of the year we can take it apart and clean it out real good. In essence, we've made this system as simple and foolproof as possible. So we have a simple pond pump, which lives in a large trash bin, and we will mount up a line that is going to feed these guys and then feed into each one of these tubes, at which point it runs to the end. You can see my elbow over here. There's an additional line right here that will lead it back to our bin and recycle the water. On the back side of each pipe, we affix it to the drainage end. And this piece here, this is what we call a bushing. And essentially what that does is it takes this at 4 inches and brings it down to 2. And this allows water to fill up in this pipe 2 inches, which the roots of the plants will sit in. Okay, so the back drainage end is connected, and essentially I've just gone through and hit everything gently but firmly, like there's such a thing as too hard, but there's such a thing as too light, against each one while holding this back, as well as along the sides. And basically I just look to make sure there's no more movement in the pipes. And then I also hammered in this guy here that returns the water. As you can see, it's at a slight angle going down all the way back to the reservoir. For my next trick, we are going to be applying putty around every joint. So that means here, 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 and here. Basically any place that pipe meets. And the reason that I do this before we have water in the system is because water, as I'm sure you guys have recognized, is friggin' heavy. And if you end up with a leak in a spot like this at the very bottom, lifting up this entire pipe to put putty under it and to do it right is really, really difficult. So I'm going to do that next. Okay, so I got all of the plumber's putty on. It's pretty tedious, so if any of you know of any place that might sell rubber O-rings for 2-inch-ish PVC, that would be awesome. It's a little tedious, but it's part of the price we pay for a modular system that we can easily clean. And now we're just going to hook up the 1/4-inch lines back here and fill this thing up and see what happens. We have our hydroponic system set up, really minimal drippage. A drip or two is totally normal, it's inevitable. Yay, design flaws. And now we're moving on to the fun part. So we have 2 buckets of water. We've got some terry towels that I've cut up. We're gonna use these as wicks, so it's gonna bring the water up if the pot doesn't touch into the medium to make sure that the baby stays moist. And then we have rock wool, or I guess this is A-OK starter plugs. And we are just gonna toss all of these in one of our buckets, and I will show you how we put plants in it. Forgive me, I'm doing this one-handed. So here's our little starter block, and sometimes they come with holes, sometimes they don't, so I'm gonna put a hole in it. Now I know in the lab manual it says, oh, like tuck the plants down in the hole. I find time-wise it's pretty inefficient, so what I do is I just break it partially open like so. Next thing I'm going to do is take this high-tech tool we call a chopstick, and I am going to very gently pull this little baby out. Now when you're lifting a plant, it's okay to lift it by the leaves. There's this ridiculous saying I have, because these are babies, right? You see that? You could think of this little spot here like the baby's neck. You never pick up a baby by the neck. You can pick it up by the feet, you can pick it up by the hair. So I'm gonna lift this guy by its leaves, aka its hair, and I'm gonna bring it over to this bucket, and I'm just gonna gently slosh it around and dislodge the majority of the medium from its little roots. A little shake. That's probably good enough. I mean, if I had 2 hands, I would make it perfect. I don't. This is an example. And then we're just gonna kind of get it into this little starter plug. Make sure its roots are coming out, damn you camera, the bottom. And then we're gonna take one of our cups. Actually, I'll use this one. I like these better. And we're just gonna set it in here. And the big thing with hydroponics to make sure for is that you're pushing this media block all the way to the bottom. And that's it. I totally forgot to add with that last example. So the reason I like these pots a little bit better is because they have these really wide openings where you can see with the first one I picked up, it has these little itty bitty ones. And these extra wide openings allow for me to use this makeshift wick to where I can just kind of tuck it in here and just set it along the bottom, and then the roots come in contact with that. This end dangles in our nutrient solution water, and that way we make absolutely sure that there is no desiccation of those little baby roots. Okay, 96 plants later, we've got 3 rows of lettuce, 2 rows of Swiss chard, 3 rows of Italian parsley. Each row has 12 in it, so you can do the math. And I think this is a good time to once again remind you what the big difference between hydroponic and aquaponic is. Now they both use water medium to grow plants. They are soilless. Hydroponic, we can control the pH, we can control all the different nutrients that we add, all of them must be added, and then we can measure them accordingly. We can also treat these plants for pests if they get any, and it is on the whole just very precise, very controllable. And when you talk about your aquaponics system, which uses fish, the only nutrient actually coming out of this system through the water is the nitrogen in the waste of the fish. So there's some E. coli risk technically, and only nitrogen comes from the fish. That means I have to add the phosphorus, potassium, iron, all the different trace nutrients. These guys, incidentally, do not poop nutrients except nitrogen. On top of that, they are extremely sensitive to water conditions, so I have to dechlorinate the water before I add it, and I cannot treat this system, any of the plants in it, with pesticides if we get any sort of insect pest. So it's highly sensitive. The nitrogen levels are variable. The nitrogen will uptick when I feed them because they always crap like crazy when they eat. and then it'll go back down as the plants extract it. So it's very up down throughout the day, pretty inconsistent. It's a lot more difficult for me to monitor nutrients in this system, and we just kind of have to take it day by day. So aquaponics are less precise when it comes to growing plants, and I think that's why most people generally focus on aquaponics for fish production rather than for plant production. So a couple noticeable differences. And that is these systems in a nutshell. I will update you guys with the numbers once they roll in. I hope you're doing good.